fair complected person as the standard through which photography is developed, even if you have standards, you still won't get the result that we want. So I think there's that piece too, which is why I think it's so important who was the one who was creating. I don't find that to be a coincidence, right? And so the last piece on top of all of that, right, has to be some element of accountability, which I think is an incredibly difficult, unsolved space, right? If you have a system that is making a prediction, someone takes that prediction, takes an action, and causes an adverse effect. So let's think about a medical facility. Who's liable? Is it the doctor? Is it the person who built the model? Is it the company? Is it the hospital? Is it the data scientist? Who is it? Right? And we have a lot of legalese around how we actually word, we call it we can't say that it's creating the diagnosis, right? We have to say that it's an assistive technology. Okay, so it's an assistive technology, but we know how human behavior works, right? And if you have a person who, over the course of 365 days, uses this thing 360 days, and it's right 90% of the time, how often are they going to go double back and check? It's not about them not being professional, it's about the human condition, right? So if they stop checking and something bad happens, is it on them or is it at the company who then employed or deployed the technology, right? I don't have the answer for that, but I think this is the type of complexity that we're really going to start to see, because I mean, you can see some of that stuff with Tesla, right? These aren't simple problems, and you know, you've identified some really, Keita identified some really kind of very clear ways that you can go about tactically to try to resolve some of it, but it has to be layered on top of some element of accountability, and that's a totally unresolved space.
Thank you for that. Hold on to that, because my next question I'd like you to begin the answers with, and then we'll go on. For those who are interested, the standard that Keita mentioned is GDPR, and it is quite terse reading, but there's lots of summaries out there that you can find, including some good videos that cover what it is and what its impact is. Emmanuel, the reason I wanted this to stay with you is you mentioned as part of your answer, the need for different representation in the room. And I looked up, in preparing for tonight, Facebook, Google, Apple, all of them, they have their diversity reports online. And since Facebook's not represented on the panel, I thought I'd pick on them. So according to Facebook's diversity report, quote, the percentage of black employees in technical roles remained flat as did the percentage of black employees in leadership roles at 1% and 2% respectively. So I'd like to first just get your take on how maybe having more representation in those roles might help address some of the challenges, or at least become a step in the right direction of addressing some of the challenges. And then also, what are some of the things that folks here in this room can take away in terms of ways of thinking about getting involved, right? And as we heard from the discussion, there's lots of different ways to get involved, technical, non-technical, et cetera. But how can we start to have more involvement that could be fun for people, but also might start to change the dialogue and what we see in solutions?
Yes. I mean, I'm comfortable being critical of Google also, because it comes from a place of love, and I think we have a lot of influence in the space, and so I think it's harder for me to speak on Facebook because I don't run Facebook. But I will say that, you know, at least for the teams that, you know, I've been on, it is just me. And it has been just me for many of the teams that I've been on. What's even more scary is that actually on the international delegation, this last meeting, I was the only person of color. And there was not a single African nation represented in the entire space. And so when you start thinking about, has anyone, you have heard of HIPAA compliance?
Yes.
Yep. Do you know what HIPAA compliance was based off of? ISO standards. They are almost directly correlated to ISO standards, which essentially means that if you were in the room in these standards meetings, you essentially created the framework for HIPAA compliance. So imagine if you have no people of color building the frameworks by which regulation is going to be created for massive, massive, massive regulatory pushes. So the impact of that from a negative perspective is off the charts. How do we go about changing that? One, I think we have to change how we are thinking about how we are defining talent and being really honest about what we really need in the room. Especially around spaces, you know, I say Google has this really bad tendency, and it's not just Google, like it's a lot of these tech companies, right? The top firms end up having these checklists, these laundry lists of, like I want a PhD to be, I need a PhD and you need to have 15 years of work experience, but we're going to bring you in at a level 3 or a level 4. Because we have that many people who are applying that we know we can get someone who does this. Do you actually need a PhD for that job? No. Probably not. Now there are some roles that you need to. Having a PhD would be great. If you're going to lead a research team, you should probably have a PhD. But there's a lot of times when that's not the case. And so I personally spend a lot of time with my leads, with our tech leads, our directors, specifically walking them through this. And I ask them, I said, well, what do you want? They said, well, you know, at the end of the day, I said, all right, forget, close your laptop, don't look at the job description that you wrote. What do you want? And they're like, well, at the end of the day, I just want someone, you know, who, we were talking about it for one of our privacy teams, privacy and AI teams. They said, I just want someone who really is passionate about privacy. You know, they just really care about it and they have some experience in the space. And you know, I know we have kind of a niche area and, you know, I don't expect them to know all of that stuff, but, you know, if they just knew a little bit about, you know, at least engineering and privacy, I think that would be enough. I said, okay, well, do they have to be an engineer? And they said, well, yeah, well, actually, no, they just need to know linear algebra. They need to know it really well, and they need to love math and computation. And I'm looking at the job description, I said, where is any of this? That's not what you wrote. You wrote PhD, 15 years of experience, yada, 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 yada. That's not what you just told me. So there's inconsistencies in how we even go about the sourcing process. So there's that. And then I think the last piece is starting to understand the contextual experience that we have. We all have blind spots. Even though I am black, I'm still a man. So I also have blind spots. And it's important for me to have women coworkers or people of all different types. Like I need that because I am bound to not think of something from someone else's perspective. I'm human. And we have to be comfortable and understand that we're human and we can make those mistakes and we will make those mistakes. And so if you have diverse teams, they will cover your back. But you also have to empower them to be able to speak up. You can't just say, let's put one black person in the room, hey, black person, solve this problem for us, right? Like they have to feel equal parts owner and all that. But I'm hogging too much space, so I'm going to pass this.
Well, let me invite any other panelists to perhaps answer that same question.
Yeah, I'll add to it from the perspective of Salesforce because I actually founded Oldforce, which is our global employee network for employees of African descent. Yeah, and I started it for that reason. You know, I joined Salesforce 12 years ago, and you know, if I happened to bump into a black person, I was like, "Whoa, can we be friends?" And you know, and before that, you know, I mean. What got me into technology was like an unwillingness to be broke, because I'm actually an artist. Like I'm like, by nature I'm an artist, and I was like, I'm not gonna be broke, so I'm gonna do this engineering thing. But when I started coding, there weren't statistics out there that said you're less likely to succeed if you're African American in tech. There was no perception of that. There were no horror stories of being black and in tech. There were plenty of horror stories about being black and being a graphic artist or working at Marvel or working in DC or breaking into comics. So when I thought about what direction I was going to go into, I really wanted to do graphic design and make comic books and be like Stan Lee, but I saw all these barriers there. And I didn't see any barriers in tech. All I saw in tech was, you just need to come up with the right answer. And I was like, I can do that. But at the same time, I didn't go through at all the traditional route of getting into technology. I don't have a bachelor's degree. I don't have a master's degree. I never went to school. I was 16 years old building apps, telling people how to use the internet and that they better like get ready because it's coming. Then I was telling people like you better get ready and serious about this cloud thing because it's going to take your job. And now I'm doing the same thing with AI, right? And so I think one of the big challenges with diversity in tech really has to do with the network. And this is why, like, I'm super introverted, but like when I see people walk in this room, I'm walking up and I'm introducing myself to people, and that's hard for me. And it's because I know that all of these networks are social networks. It's the people that you feel comfortable with, and ultimately, at a company like Salesforce, so many white people don't have black friends. So they don't even, you know, if they're conversing with you in an interview, you know, the way I talk about technology, I can guarantee you it's not how any other white person at Salesforce talks about technology. So if you're comfortable with talking to someone who's going to talk to you a little bit differently, and you're going to see that as valuable, then you're going to be like, I want to bring this person in. But they haven't been exposed enough. So they may see a person who absolutely can do this job, absolutely is the best person for the job, but they're literally culturally unfamiliar with you, and that makes them uncomfortable. And this is something that is constantly being talked about today. They're calling it unconscious bias, but they're approaching it completely wrong, and I'm still pissed. I'm like they're not approaching the problem right. They're not saying, you know, hey, Asian people, white people, make black friends. If you don't, you're screwing up. Ultimately, that's what we need to say. You cannot afford to be homogenous. You're going to ruin the world. Like, that's what needs to be said. And so, yeah, you know, when those job descriptions go out there, a lot of women are not applying for them because they say, well, I don't actually fit the description, but there's going to be some number of white dudes that are going to see that job description, but their friend is going to say, no, you should apply anyway, because all they're really looking for is somebody who's really passionate about linear algebra. That's a social network problem, right? People have to solve this problem. So like, I feel like we're still trying to put in systems and regulations. Since the civil rights movement, we've been trying to put in systems and regulations and rules to hold people accountable to just being decent individuals. And that doesn't work. Like, we need a whole, like, Obama needs to be like talking to white people and saying like, hey, you ain't right. Here's how you need to fix it. Like, it needs to be people who are really powerful and influential to say, these are the social norms in our society which are broken.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna switch gears and go to a question that I have for each of you. Sure.
So I'll try to keep it short. I could talk all day about this. I do have horror stories, and I got a lot of big people who have horror stories. So just live a little longer.
I have 2 minutes.
Okay.
But I didn't know them when I was coming in.
Oh, right. Yeah, they're very good at keeping that stuff quiet, that's for sure. So I've been in the corporate world and doing entrepreneurship now. I may go back to the corporate world, see how much how big of a check they pay me, you know. But one thing I would say is if we want to stop these problems, I would say one, avenue is we should invest in black businesses. There are a lot of people doing good stuff in artificial intelligence, machine learning, starting their own companies, and a lot of them are on different platforms asking for investment, and so we should invest in them. And you know, if you have businesses or you have some colleagues, you should start hiring them. Like there may be some AI consulting firms that could help you. So just investing in Pan-African or African-American businesses, AI companies is one thing. I think that there are a lot of companies in Africa that are growing and growing fast, and they're using a lot of tech and they're using a lot of AI, and they're going to be big companies in the long run. Yeah, I would just say, just invest in your own at the end of the day.
Cool, thank you for that. You know, this is such a passionate topic. I know as we were putting together this panel, this was one of the discussions that we wanted to have, and we know it would take a bit of time. I'm sorry I have to cut it off for us because it's such a rich conversation. But I do want to ask each of you your own individualized question. Yay. And then I'd like to invite the audience to ask any questions they might have of this really well-informed, distinguished panel that we have this evening. So Keita, you have the microphone. So I'm going to just ask you to maybe just share some thoughts on workshops that you've held in the past, workshops that you might be thinking about planning, and how they might be able to help people maybe get their feet wet or understand a little bit more about this space, and just your thoughts about leveraging that or perhaps other tools that they might leverage.
Okay, thank you. So in the past, I've done different workshops at various conferences just to give people some practical tools for different aspects of technology and machine learning. So I've done a workshop on how to combine maps technology with machine learning. I've done conferences that I've done talks at conferences that give people an introduction to AI and machine learning, much the same as this panel is doing. And in the future, a few weeks from now, there's going to be a workshop that we're going to hold that will be an introduction for people with coding and without coding to machine learning and solving practical problems with machine learning. So if you come there, you bring your laptop, we'll give you an account to a service on the cloud, and you don't have to have any coding experience. You can go through a complete cycle where we take data, we run it through a model, we interpret the model, and you see how you can apply this in your own field or your own function.
Cool. Thank you for that. Ayori, I read one of your LinkedIn posts where you discuss your secret to success. And in there you talk about faith, work ethic, inspiration, and mentoring, which I think are all great for every individual out there. When you think of AI projects or companies or leaders, what do you think are the required keys to success there?
Yeah, I think for AI projects, making AI projects successful is first the acceptance that you will experience failure along the way, right? Like most AI projects that end up succeeding, they succeed at like phase 3, or attempt 3, right? Because you're going to find all these issues as you're going along the way. And so you have to already enter into the space knowing that you will experience failure. The people who wait 5 more or 10 years will not have that experience. They will be able to just go in, flip a switch, turn it on, and they're going to be successful. They are going to be looking for a job in 5 and 10 years. You are not, because you're going to be employed by the top companies in the world, right? So start now. What has been really helpful for me in how did I get into AI? Like, it doesn't even make sense for like me to be in AI, right? But I got in it, I'm able to succeed here because I've been doing it for a long time. And I've been doing it for a long time knowing that the likelihood of success, the likelihood of this becoming big was not there. So I suffered a lot, so you can suffer a little, but it's worth it to suffer now. And I really mean it because, like, I mean, I'm telling you, during the dot-com boom and I was a teenager, and like there were people like twice my age sitting down asking me, is this internet thing gonna stick around? And I'm like, yeah, not only is it gonna stick around, but you need a website now and I'll build it for you, right? Some of them followed suit, some of them listened, others didn't. And I still to this day have people come back to me from the 90s talking about the internet, like, dang, I wish I listened, right? So listen now, you're here, so we know you're listening, you're already in the right group, but take it further. So like the handouts that you have there, there's a link at the bottom of it, ainewbies.com. Go there, join our LinkedIn community. There's a button on that page that says join our community. There's another button on the page that says you can download this cheat sheet. That's how you give me your contact information. If I have your contact information, you're gonna succeed, because I'm gonna make sure you do. So go to my website and do those things, and that's how companies succeed with AI.
Thank you. Emmanuel, Emmanuel, you once shared in an interview that the best advice you ever received is from your Uncle David, who said, don't let your success up until this point blind you with the facade of privilege. Why is this statement so important to you, and what words of inspiration would you share with the audience this evening?
That was the toned down version of what my uncle really said. Because I couldn't say what my uncle really said. But I think that actually does frame, I think, how I perceive my work at Google and outside of Google. You know, I've stayed away from, I think, a lot of the core Google businesses, fundamentally because I feel as though I have the opportunity to be in a space, be at a company that is extremely influential. And it would be a missed opportunity if I did not use all of the things that I've learned and think about my community from back home in Pittsburgh and all of the people around me to elevate the voices that are not in the room, who haven't had a chance to sit in a meeting with Larry Page, or to have an opportunity to influence how some products are built. And so I think it's just a very kind of grounding and humbling kind of constant reminder that there is something, or I've always felt called that you're put in this position to do something bigger than to make more rich people money. And so I think that's just a constant reminder.
Cool, thank you. And Will, you get to bat cleanup for us tonight. Last year, you gave a talk on, and I saw it on YouTube, and I think it was entitled Demystifying Data Science. And I found that very interesting because in that talk you talked about what it takes to be successful. You talked about a wide range of diverse skills. We had that conversation here tonight. I know your background in computational neuroscience is pretty diverse just by its title alone. What parting advice or thoughts would you give to this audience about kind of that interdisciplinary diversity that we could all bring to the AI conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's go on, Mike. So I would say, kind of summarizing a few of these things, don't rest on where you are today. If you want to be in this space, have a little bit of an anticipation of where we're going to be going. So stay quantitative, do more things in computation, or at least surround yourself with computational people. And something else that I've really leveraged, rely on your strengths, right? If you're a person that does X really well, market that to people that have skills that you want to be a part of your repertoire in the future, right? think it's not that complicated. Just get where the puck's going, and also don't be shy. Get in there now. I totally agree with that. Love it.
Cool, thank you. I would like to invite you to still stay with us, but I would like to see if there's any questions from the audience that the panel might be able to address for you. So, go ahead.
First of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to all of you guys. I've never seen a lot of compliments. Usually one of y'all, but to have all four of them, it's a blessing. It's a blessing. I'm curious about two things. Number one, how do you guys stay sharp? How do you do that quantitative analysis to look forward and position yourself to optimize your potential, whether it's your business, where you work? What are the things that you guys are, what groups are you in, what periodicals do you read, what lives are you in? Because I want to read it.
So I've been in like hardcore, like out in this for a long time. And I gotta tell you, it's easier today than it's ever been. So Medium is a great place where people are talking about specific things. It's typically problem focused. Many companies are coming out and their engineering teams are putting things on their own blogs. Another, like just going back to why AI is successful today, I would also say just the general sharing of information has been really, really amazing. So if you look at the big companies, their tech blogs, what they're doing, and then Medium articles focusing on some sort of data and anything that you're interested in, I think that's going to keep you continually reading about it in a context that includes an algorithm or it includes data. I think that's a good.
Thank you for that question and answer. Let's see if there are other questions out there. In the back and then over here.
First, just echo thanks for you guys being here. The humility with which you approach this panel is really remarkable, given the qualifications and how it gets to work. Right now, we seem to be in a time where people are running after a lot of the low-hanging fruit. Things where there is a lot of data. The business side, of course, places that's been discussed, given where you can gather data for 50 years or more. Where do you see the early opportunities in areas where there hasn't been a lot of data? I know that people are looking into unstructured data. DARPA's got stuff out there talking about the third wave. All the calls seem to be somehow circling around dealing with unstructured, untagged data. What do you see coming?
Well, my comment is going to be more like there are a lot of people who are trying to find the needle in the haystack with these large, big data sets. Somebody's going to hit it big over there. Most people are not. Where I think the real value lies is in smaller data sets. So like traditionally we have talked about machine learning like you need to have hundreds of thousands or millions of rows of data in order to get quality predictions. That's not the case. What shifts your answer is when you start to think about what is my definition of quality and how am I planning to use this prediction? Am I using it, and what is this prediction for? Like, is it for something that is like something that's going to impact a life-saving decision of delivering medicine or sending someone to jail or not? If that's the case, yeah, you better make sure you have a huge data set and all that kind of stuff. But if you're trying to figure out, hey, which customer should I call first? You don't need millions and millions of rows of data. Like you could have like 1,000 rows of data and you could find a pattern in that. So, you know, folks who are out there who are gathering data, start looking for patterns in any of your data sets where you think there are answers that you haven't found yet. Like, just build a practice. I am going to recommend one of the tools to you that we make over at Salesforce. It's called Einstein Discovery. It's a very basic analytics tool. You put a data set in there and then you ask it questions, right? And it can start spitting predictions out for you. And I think like the minimum row set is probably around 1,000 rows or something like that. It's not a lot of data. A lot of people have 1,000 rows of data sitting around. And you might be able to find something in it and you might not. But fortunately, it doesn't take a long time to do. You don't have to do any coding. It's just, you just start iterating and you start looking. And you will, I believe, more likely find a needle in those haystacks than all those other ones.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer. I think we have one more question over here.
Thanks so much, panel, for coming out tonight and talking to us. My question is more around like data gathering and using data sets that currently exist as it relates to industries that rely on photography. Do you think there would be a benefit in using services like Ancestry.com or MyHeritage DNA to really help focus on how to categorize or correctly identify persons of different backgrounds, if say you have pictures related to an ancestry test?
Could you elaborate on that some more?
Yeah, so earlier in the discussion we talked about like being able to identify persons of African descent. But I wanted to expand it a little bit more to think of not just Black people, people of all colors, so that these algorithms can learn to like basically be training how to categorize certain people and not just say, well, it's or something. Could you see it being beneficial using like DNA tests and things like that to help with the AI categorizing people appropriately, and maybe even mixed individuals and things like that by looking at the data sets that currently exist and seeing repeatable or, not just repeatable, but a plethora of different backgrounds to, like for police, for instance. You're going to be able to say, like, this is a person that could be African American or Latino. Like, using those data sets as a way to standardize the process of AI. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sorry. What signals do you think someone could gather from that, from Ancestry?
Or if you have multiple, definitely if people that have access to it, I know that there could be some nuance there, like income, economic disparities kind of play a factor in that, but at least for individuals that have used a DNA set before, being able to use that data in a way that will help identify them from being targeted or looking for different characteristics of individuals. Say, I'm kind of picking on the niece right now, but being able to accurately identify the right people that they're looking for with cameras and with video, photography, and things like that, or even when they put these pictures or sketches online, being able to use that data better than just kind of having biased